Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you are in the world. Welcome to the BlueMogu Big Education Podcast. We're here today to talk about curating your portfolio. It's your creative handshake. It tells somebody else what your work's all about, what you're passionate about, your interests, your style, your format. So let's get straight into it. Let's tell your story. My name is Saul Higgins. I've worked in the education sector for over 12 years. And I've worked with students to develop their portfolios. I've worked on business programs, portfolio programs, project management, operations, academic, you name it. We've been there for the past couple of years. So today we're going to dive into how to curate your portfolio. Got a couple of examples of some early work that I did many moons ago, some from 2014 and some other projects that I worked on when I was starting to develop my project, develop my style and trying to figure out what everything's about. So I'll go into these ones in a little bit of a moment, but first we're just going to revisit kind of some of the messages that we've had in other episodes where it's about our sketchbooks, about what we think is important, but essentially that final ideas are not instant. Your portfolio is something that you're going to be working on and curating, and it will kind of evolve as your sketchbook evolves, and you'll try and utilize the evolution of that to make your final pieces. But it's something that might take a little bit of time. And then when you see portfolios on things like Behance or on Pinterest or Instagram, where they're highly polished, highly curated, it's often kind of pressurizing sometimes. So you want to get to that level, but there's a curve, there's a threshold of it, and it's a steep learning curve when you're first getting to grips with what a portfolio is. But eventually you'll get to it. And especially when you're working in a series and developing like critical parts of your sketchbook, it's where it will start to gain momentum. So it depends, portfolios depend largely on what you want to apply for. So if it's for university, we'll cover a little bit more detail about what you might see in a university portfolio. We touched on it a little bit in the sketchbook episode. For industry portfolios, they might be more demonstrating specialization, technical skills, professional readiness, things that you are wanting to kind of, you're selling yourself and your skills. And it's something where these ones, for example, this is an old portfolio that I did when I was in a work placement many years ago, working for a fashion company. And I did this in my free time to kind of show an array of all the different styles that I was working in, where I was printing for jerseys, where it was going into sportswear, where they was doing labeling and packaging and things like that. And these as kind of final portfolio pieces, which weren't ready in this, but there was a separate entity, and I put that on Behance to kind of showcase it. And then showcase portfolios are kind of things where you might have a reel of your absolute cream of the creme work, where you want to show it, and especially if it's video or if it's something audio or something like that, where you can put it on a digital media, you showcase reel, you can compact it into a kind of a show reel, and that's something that's easy to send. It's easy to send a link over, much easier to do online these days. But things like this, where you're working with more tactile and print things, I did it in this style because I was trying to reach out to somebody where I knew they was interested in kind of print and tactile art, visual communication, and I was interested to get my foot in the door with that. So I made it into a newspaper format, and I sent it over to those that industry studio, and then tried to get some feedback. The first thing was I was trying to showcase to try and get some work with them, but it was to showcase and get some feedback from industry professionals about how I could step into that industry. So that's another critical or key part of portfolios that you might want to think about, is what is your audience, who are you showing it to, why are you showing it? So if it's for university, it's to get your application approved and then kind of showcase your skills and that you want to develop, that you're interested in the industry. But if you go in and delivering a portfolio for something that's industry focused, you're really selling your skills and you're selling the message that you are wanting to be part of that industry, and you're ready, and you can evolve and adapt and just gel with that team essentially. For experimental and development portfolio works, people usually hide this in like on other layers of the websites, for example, or if for example, if it's you have a portfolio that's mainly on Instagram, it's highly polished. So to put in experimental work, it doesn't quite fit with your theme. So this is something that people often work on in the background for your own kind of personal gains. Or, for example, colleagues where they might post it on LinkedIn, where they're getting feedback from other professionals in the industry and showing a development of the style and just an engagement with different types of industries as well, to show that you can do it and that you are versatile. But they are kind of experimental until you start to bring that into your portfolio. Or in particular, if you are developing a portfolio for a specific shift to a different sector, for example, if it's web design or coding or something like that, you might want to showcase those things in a different format. But they all start with a kind of experimental development style from a sketchbook or a digital sketchbook. Like if you're coding and things like, or doing web design, your digital sketchbook might be a website. It might be like you've developed a website and put it on, and then you've got a narrative on there of how to do it and how you've gone about it, along with screenshots and things like that. For business portfolios, it's slightly different. Obviously, we're focusing on the creative aspects now, but I think it's important that, especially if you go into freelance later down the line, setting up your kind of business portfolio is key as well, where you're showing and telling on LinkedIn or other kind of professional websites about how your how your story is developing. Are you doing kind of Google SEO website development type of certifications and things like that? Are you experimenting with different styles? Have you got a show reel that you want some feedback from the industry from? What are you trying to say? But essentially, you're showing that you've got a development. And if you're starting early, then by the time you get to your final year of university, for example, or more mature portfolio stages, then that's when people will be able to scroll through and see kind of your engagement with it. And just engaging with something for a long time it will show development and you'll feel a development. It's similar to if you, for example, if you start to work in a series and then you develop something in a series of different colors. When you put them together, they kind of complement each other, even though they're different colors, even if they might be something that looks terrible in somebody's eyes. When they're in a series of patterns or a series of colors or a series of the same kind of style, then it's something where it just ties it together.
Do you work with audio or podcasts and that type of thing? So
a strong portfolio is quality over quantity. So for a university portfolio, you're probably looking at about 8 to 12 final pieces of work. In that, you might show some of your series of work. For university applications, I definitely encourage you to put some kind of narrative on there, where you've got some annotation about it. It's really easy if you're on a digital website like Behance that's free to upload and it looks stylized, it's clean. Definitely worth to put some annotation about things where you've reflected on your sketchbook work and then how you've chosen to make it into a final piece of work, or why you've chosen to make it in that particular style, or how you might have made a leap from an element of your sketchbook and then took an idea and just ran with it into some kind of beautiful final piece, or just a series of work that goes into your portfolio to show your development. But really, it's a couple of 8 to 12 final quality pieces of work that you're able to talk about, and we'll go into that in a minute. You want to show some relevance to your goal, so tailoring your portfolio to kind of what the opportunity is, what the stream is. So if you're applying to university, making sure that if you're applying for a fashion course, that is relevant to a fashion course, that you've got your own kind of primary research, you've got secondary research, you've got interesting kind of materials, that type of thing. Or if you're doing graphics, are you experimenting with like logo design, brand identity, typography, different types of print media and digital, and then obviously keeping up to date with the industry expectations of, for example, one of my colleagues they're an illustrator, and they said that designers now, they're pretty much coders. They need to learn how to code, they need to learn how to do web design or cut videos up and do work with audio or podcasts and that type of thing. So It's making sure that your portfolio has got relevant information, relevant to the industry. If you're not at that stage yet, then just focus on those development areas and focus on how you're taking on your sketchbook work and your development work, and then just be ready to articulate that, be ready to be able to talk about it, be ready to explain your processes and why you're interested in it, essentially. Show of your interests are kind of key in your portfolio, in the sense that portfolios on websites, or especially for university portfolios and applications, it can be quite a pattern where you're setting the bar quite high, or the style quite high, where you're wanting to emulate some kind of certain styles in particular to develop those skills. But really, it's an exploration and it's an understanding of it's 8 to 12 final pieces, but it's your style. You can work to other styles, but don't pressure yourself to work in somebody else's style. Just be ready to talk about why you might want to develop that, or why you've attempted to do that, and how that's come out into your final piece. Little tip and trick is to be the sequel. So, for example, if you've got a strong piece of sketchbook work, then just to build that up into a series. So if you're struggling for final pieces and you're wanting to hide it away, or you're throwing work away because you feel not ready to show it, or it's not ready to be a final piece, then try and work on a series of another stronger piece of work, for example. And a good example of that is just to kind of start researching. We've got other videos on the podcast where it's looking at where to find inspiration from places where you wouldn't think there was inspiration, whether it's finding color palettes in just photographs, or just going for a walk and then seeing what kind of brand identities are out there, just finding inspiration. So it could be anything from just looking at some photographs, or it could be whether you're looking at mid-century and things like that and trying to revive something from the past and think about how it's going to look like in the future. What does the context of 1950s look like now? And then we've got all those kind of themes currently being revisited, where you've got all space themes, like Archie's brand identity, for example, where it's got like the atomic logo and it looks a little bit like Fallout. And then on that example, we've got TV series where like Fly Me to the Moon or Fallout or Silo, where they're kind of these space sci-fi kind of elements, but these was all kind of ideas from the 50s and whatnot as well, during space races. So taking old ideas and trying to think of what they'd be like new, and then the same goes for in your sketchbook or old final pieces, what they might look like as the final portfolio, or to build them up as a series, and just using that just to build a strong 8 to 12 pieces of work. A big part of this, as I've been trying to articulate, is what's your brand. So working in other people's styles is a great way to develop, and it's a great way to understand like technical skills, and then get into a kind of highly polished way of working. But obviously you've got your own style, and that's what your sketchbook, that's kind of the message from the sketchbook podcast, is that your style just develops as you continue to work and just experiment and do things that you feel uncomfortable about, or that you might not want to show people. You might want to be a bit protected about it. But your style is going to develop through that. And that's eventually how you'll get to your portfolios and how people remember you. So these are a really good example of where this artist is called Solbas, and he illustrates, he uses 2 different color palettes, uses a lot of overlays, uses risograph, and I was experimenting with all those types of things, where I was working with layering and these kind of high color, high hue, high contrast colors, and just overlays and very basic kind of visual language. So where it's like using symbolism and using literal meanings for kind of line vector diagrams and things like that. And then this style became really, really popular for kind of websites, iconography, that type of thing. But I was just experimenting with it, and I'll just show you this one quickly. But in the other videos, there's kind of a theme throughout, where it's just a really simple, like And then working with renewable energy, so we've got the circle, cyclone, and the lightning bolt for the energy, visual language. We've got the mountainscape there, the blue for the water, and then ice. We've got, this is for data centers where you've got the big brain linking into the servers. We've got, this is kind of a wind-up mechanism for a rechargeable battery, old Casio watch, fuel pumps and stuff like that. And it's kind of it's a callback to some of some of these are like old ideas. For example, some of these ideas were like from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and whatnot, for the types of fuels and the types of roadways, and then the sustainability angle of this kind of magazine. But this is a callback to kind of like the original 3D glasses as well. So that's Sol Bass, that graphic designer, was working with these kind of two-tone pieces of work, and it reminded me of these kind of old school 3D glasses that you used to wear, which you don't really need now. They look like more like sunglasses, but it's a callback to that. So it's something that evolved, but just through loads of experimentation. And that the sketchbook that I used for these projects, it was just full of kind of different layers of risograph prints, where I've just layered things and used paints. And I did a lot of screen printing as well at the time, so those kind of works complemented each other. And then my sketchbook was just loads of photographs of all those things and scans, and then eventually I put it into a digital format, and then I printed it out into it. My sketchbook became another kind of physical book where it was all laid out in InDesign. I dropped all the pictures into a format, and then I'd made it into a Japanese like cotton bound book, and it turned out really well. It worked. It was quite a nice piece, just to articulate how I'd made those magazines. So even once you've got to your final portfolio, and then you've got 8 to 12 pieces, you're thinking you're ready for it. The next stage is to literally be able to talk about it. So you need to be able to emphasize how you've explored your work, how you've problem solved, where you've got stuck, where you've run out of inspiration, you've got that kind of creative block, how you've got through that, and why you've chose those pieces really. So what interests you about them? You're going to show some of your development work, or you're going to be able to talk about it. That's the key point when there's an interview, or if you've not got to that interview stage yet and you just send in your portfolio. How do they know, or how are you telling them? So are you telling them through some little thumbnails of your work, or are you telling them through your annotation, or do you have the opportunity to be able to literally speak? Do you have the opportunity to be able to speak and then have a face-to-face online meeting or in person, like run through your sketchbook? And especially if you're doing it in a different language, being able to talk about your sketchbook is absolutely critical, to be able to explain your ideas, and obviously use some creative language as well. A good talking point as well is to be able to link that to what your goals and ambitions are. So particularly to be able to talk about how your sketchbook, if it's not fully ready yet, or if you don't have 8 to 12 pieces, if you've only got a couple of pieces and the rest of it is just sketchbook, or even if you're starting with some doodles and then wanting to get some feedback and you're just taking a chance on it, just be able to talk about your goals and ambitions. Like that goes a long way to be able to articulate just why you want to do it, why you're interested in it, what you're interested by, and then talk about processes that you're interested in. How do you capture attention? So being able to lay your work out in an attractive way, definitely get feedback, or definitely look at portfolios on different websites, like all these websites. You got Behance, Pinterest, Instagram, Little Red Book or Red Note, Sketchbook, the app. On YouTube, there's loads of different videos about portfolios, and there's loads of blogs online. Speak with your peers, or just look at a book for portfolios. We'll drop some links in the in the comments in the description. But essentially, you can just look at other sketchbooks and look at other portfolios and see how they're curated, how they're laid out on the paper. It might be, sometimes you might think of a portfolio where it's the full kind of page, but you might want to break it down so that it's a third of the page and you've got some development and some annotation and it's really quite clean. If you've got friends that are graphic designers, or if you're working with some like online software and you're not confident in layout, you can drop it into different layouts and just focus on your style of, for example, illustration or fashion. Focus on your development work and then take a photo, then drop it into a tidier layout where it can show your development clearly. And it gives you a good kind of path, especially if you're in an interview and you wanted to talk about it. It gives you a path to be able to run through. Use the physical books where I talked about like being tactile and things like that. Don't just rely on online stuff. Go to the library, look at art books on sketchbooks, look at old sketchbooks, look at how people are presenting work, even like Da Vinci's sketchbooks and stuff where you've got a real narrative of where he's scribbling different ideas, he's drawing different things, it's evolving. Like that's a good example of a development sketchbook to look at. And then just pick up things like newspapers, flyers, printed materials. If you go into galleries, grab the little lookbooks and things that they have, or look at different collections. Just grab things and then start to integrate that into your sketchbook. Rip things out of those flyers, stick them in, write about it, how that's inspired you, and then bring that into your portfolio. And then use that as your strength for when you're articulating and you're explaining your work of how it led to this final stylized portfolio. So just to kind of summarize, we've got some tips for this. So 8 to 12 pieces is kind of your threshold. Try and even 12 is too many, really. You want to just kind of refine it to something where it's clean cut. You're able to talk about it. You've shown your development. You've shown your interests. You've got a narrative through it as well, and you've shown your ability to work in a series, and you'll be able to explain how you want to move into your stream. So it's whether it's fashion, graphics, whatever that might be. And then your ambitions. So it's a talking point of that. You want to be able to work in a series. You want to keep it fairly consistent in terms of the sizing and formatting. So when I was in college, for example, we used to use an A1 portfolio that used to carry. But on that, we used to cut things out of our sketchbook and scan them and print them out and then make them into a very tidy layout, which now you could do that on Canva or InDesign or Photoshop or Illustrator. But the formatting of it, you might want to think about if it's physical or if it's digital. And then if you've got things that are motion and then you put them on YouTube or Vimeo or other websites like that, how do you collate them into one place like Behance or other portfolio websites? So just have a think about that. And definitely always worth having a printed one or one on your phone. I always used to have a Behance one on my phone to be able to just scroll through and then show somebody. And then that's led to Instagram and things like that. So just have a think about how you're going to present it and how you're going to keep it clean. Like Instagram, you can't go back. It's like a constant layering effect, isn't it? Be prepared to talk about your work. It will also make up for if there is any questions about maybe the style, you wanting to develop the style, or maybe not having enough work, or it just not being to the exact level that university is asking for. Being able to explain it just go a long way. Think about digitizing your portfolio as well. So just to kind of do a final recap, a great portfolio is just not about you create, it's about how you present the story. Create your work carefully, showcase your progress, and show what's meaningful to you. Apply your skills for what you're going to need in the industry and what you're interested to pursue. It sounds difficult, and if you're not sure exactly how you're going to do that, it's no problem. Just let your unique creativity shine, work on your sketchbook, work on developing what your interests are, look at books, look at your library, look online, just develop and just put yourself into it, put yourself into your portfolio. No matter what it looks like at the end, you're going to be able to explain it because you're going to be the one that's putting it together. You're going to have some kind of story to it. So I hope that was useful. It was whistle stuff at times, but I think overall you can understand what we're looking for in creative portfolios. Something where it's going to show your creativity, show your decision making, show what you're interested in, and just a kind of stylized, cleaner version of your sketchbook where you've got some final decisions and also the ability to make a decision about what you think is the final piece. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget, if you do want to run through portfolio development, you can always book on a session. Find out more on www.bluemogu.co.uk or see more below. Thanks for listening.